Shocking truth. A teenager's simple act of kindness at a local diner sets off an unexpected chain of events, revealing hidden truths and transforming an entire community. You won't believe how this controversial decision divides a town and challenges everything we thought we knew about generosity. Is altruism a fraud? Will it choose personal gain or the greater good? This isn't the feel-good story you expect. It's the wake-up call you need. Welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The aroma of coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air of Joe's Diner, a fixture in the heart of Millbrook for over 4 decades. 14-year-old Ethan pushed open the glass door, the familiar jingle of bells announcing his arrival. He often stopped by after school, drawn by the comforting atmosphere and the chance to chat with his mother, Isabella, who waitressed there part-time. Today, however, the usual warmth of the diner was overshadowed by a tense scene unfolding near the cash register. Ethan's eyes were drawn to an elderly couple, their weathered faces etched with distress. The man, his gnarled hands trembling, was emptying his pockets onto the counter, while the woman beside him searched frantically through her worn purse. Across from them stood Rick, the diner's owner, his face a mask of impatience and frustration. Ethan recognized the couple. They were regulars, always occupying the same corner booth, sharing quiet conversations over cups of steaming coffee. "I'm sorry, but if you can't pay, you can't eat here," Rick's voice boomed, causing nearby patrons to turn and stare. The elderly woman's eyes welled with tears as she stammered, "Please, we must have misplaced our wallet. If you could just give us a moment." Rick's expression hardened. "Look, this isn't a charity. You've been here for hours. Pay up or I'll have to call the police." The threat hung heavy in the air, and Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding. He reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the crisp bills he'd been saving for months. It was meant for Alice's birthday gift, but in that moment, none of that mattered. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'd like to pay for their meal." The diner fell silent, all eyes turning to the young boy standing tall amidst the tension. Rick's eyebrows shot up in surprise, while the elderly couple looked at Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. In that moment, Ethan knew his decision would change everything. The next day at school, Ethan could feel the weight of curious stares following him through the hallways. Word of his actions at the diner had spread quickly in their small town. Some classmates patted him on the back, calling him a hero, while others snickered and whispered "sucker" as he passed. But it was Alice's reaction that Ethan dreaded most. He found her at her locker, her face unreadable as he approached. "Hey, Alice," Ethan said, his voice faltering slightly. "I guess you heard about what happened at the diner?" Alice slammed her locker shut, the sound echoing in the crowded hallway. "Yeah, I heard," she replied, her voice cold. "You gave away the money for my birthday present to some strangers. Real nice, Ethan." Before he could explain, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, surrounded by the buzz of gossip. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. During lunch, Ethan sat alone, pushing his food around his plate. He couldn't help but question his decision. Had he been foolish? Should he have minded his own business? As these thoughts swirled in his mind, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Looking up, he saw Mr. Thompson, his history teacher, smiling down at him. "I heard what you did, Ethan," Mr. Thompson said, taking a seat beside him. "It takes courage to stand up for others, especially when it comes at a personal cost. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about doing the right thing." With those words, Mr. Thompson gave Ethan's shoulder a squeeze and walked away. As Ethan watched him go, he felt a small spark of pride ignite within him. Maybe, just maybe, he had done the right thing after all. A week after the incident at the diner, Ethan found himself standing outside a modest brick house on Maple Street. He had asked around town and learned that the elderly couple, Evelyn and Henry, lived here. Taking a deep breath, he raised his hand and knocked on the faded green door. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing Evelyn's surprised face. "Oh my, it's you!" she exclaimed, her eyes crinkling with a warm smile. "Henry, come quick! It's the young man from the diner!" Ethan soon found himself seated in a cozy living room, surrounded by faded photographs and the gentle ticking of an old grandfather clock. Henry shuffled in, leaning heavily on a cane, his face lighting up at the sight of Ethan. "We've been hoping you'd come by," he said, lowering himself into an armchair. "We wanted to thank you properly for your kindness." Evelyn bustled in with a tray of tea and cookies, setting it down on the coffee table with shaky hands. As they sipped tea, Evelyn and Henry shared stories of their life together. They had been married for over 50 years, weathering the ups and downs of life side by side. Recently, things had become harder. Henry's medical bills were piling up, and their fixed income was stretched thin. "We've never been ones to ask for help," Henry explained, his voice gruff with emotion. "But that day at the diner, we truly didn't know what to do." Ethan listened intently, feeling a connection growing between him and this couple who had seen so much of life. As the afternoon light began to fade, he realized hours had passed. Rising to leave, he was surprised when Evelyn pulled him into a warm hug. "You're welcome here any time, dear," she said softly. As Ethan walked home, he felt a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. He knew this was just the beginning of something important. Ethan pushed open the door to his apartment, the familiar scent of his mother's cooking welcoming him home. Isabella stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, her face etched with the weariness of a long day's work. "Hey, Mom," Ethan called out, dropping his backpack by the door. Isabella turned, offering a tired smile. "Hi, sweetie. How was your day?" As Ethan began to recount his visit with Evelyn and Henry, he couldn't help but notice the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, their red past due stamps a stark reminder of their own struggles. As they sat down to dinner, Isabella listened intently to Ethan's stories about the elderly couple. Her eyes shone with pride, but there was a hint of worry in her voice when she spoke. "I'm so proud of you for helping them, Ethan. But I hope you know we're not in a position to be giving away money right now." She hesitated, then continued. "The diner, well, Rick's talking about cutting back on staff. I might lose some shifts." Ethan felt a pang of guilt mixed with determination. He reached across the table, taking his mother's hand. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll figure something out. Maybe I can find a part-time job after school." Isabella squeezed his hand, her eyes misty. "Oh, Ethan, you shouldn't have to worry about these things at your age." But Ethan's mind was already whirling with possibilities. He knew he had to do something to help. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he could hear his mother's muffled sobs through the thin walls of their apartment. The sound strengthened his resolve. He thought about Evelyn and Henry, about his mother's struggles, about the interconnected web of challenges faced by so many in their community. As he drifted off to sleep, a plan began to form in his mind. He might be young, but he was determined to make a difference. The next few weeks saw Ethan embarking on a mission to find work wherever he could. He started by putting up flyers around the neighborhood, offering his services for odd jobs. His first gig came from Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who needed help tending her garden. As Ethan pulled weeds and planted flowers under the hot sun, Mrs. Rodriguez regaled him with stories of her youth in Puerto Rico. By the end of the day, Ethan had earned $20 and a new friend. Word of Ethan's reliability spread quickly through the neighborhood. Soon, he was walking dogs for the Johnsons, mowing lawns for the Patels, and helping Mr. Chang organize his garage. Each job brought not just money, but new connections and insights into the lives of his neighbors. He learned about Mr. Chang's struggles as a first-generation immigrant, and how the Patels were saving every penny to send their daughter to college. Balancing work and school proved challenging. Ethan often found himself doing homework late into the night, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. But every time he handed his mother a few crumpled bills to help with groceries, or saw the grateful smile on Evelyn's face when he stopped by to help with chores, he knew it was worth it. His grades slipped a little, but his understanding of his community deepened immeasurably. One Saturday, as Ethan was raking leaves for the Smiths, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. Mr. Smith was on the phone, his voice filled with worry. "I don't know how we're going to afford Mom's medication this month," he was saying. "The prices just keep going up." As Ethan resumed his work, his mind raced. He thought about Evelyn and Henry's medical bills, about his own mother's struggles, about Mr. Smith's concerns. A bigger picture was starting to form in his mind, one that went beyond individual odd jobs. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was in the middle of a shift at the local grocery store, where he'd managed to secure a part-time job bagging groceries, when his phone buzzed. It was Henry, his voice shaky and filled with worry. "Ethan, my boy, Evelyn's in the hospital. She had a fall. I don't know what to do." Ethan's heart raced as he assured Henry he'd be there as soon as possible. As he hung up, he noticed Mr. Thompson, his manager, watching him with concern. "Everything okay, Ethan?" Mr. Thompson asked. Ethan explained the situation, his voice tight with worry. Mr. Thompson nodded understandingly. "Go on then. Your shift's almost over anyway." As Ethan turned to leave, Mr. Thompson added, "Oh, and Ethan? Don't forget about your job interview tomorrow. It's a great opportunity." Ethan froze. In his panic over Evelyn, he'd completely forgotten about the interview at the local community center. It was for a summer program that could potentially lead to a scholarship. His mother had been so excited when he'd told her about it. At the hospital, Ethan found Henry sitting alone in the waiting room, looking small and lost. "She's in surgery," Henry explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Broke her hip." Ethan sat with Henry for hours, listening to him reminisce about his life with Evelyn, offering words of comfort when words failed the older man. As the night wore on, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the interview. He knew he should go home, prepare, get some rest. But every time he thought about leaving, he looked at Henry's worried face and knew he couldn't. Dawn was breaking when the doctor finally emerged with news. Evelyn was out of surgery and stable. The relief on Henry's face was palpable. As Ethan helped Henry to Evelyn's room, he made his decision. He would stay, make sure Evelyn and Henry were okay. The interview would have to wait. As he watched the elderly couple reunite, tears in their eyes, Ethan felt a mix of emotions. He knew he was probably giving up a big opportunity, but somehow, being here felt more important. He just hoped he was making the right choice. Ethan's decision to stay with Evelyn and Henry had consequences he couldn't have anticipated. The missed interview at the community center was a disappointment, but as he sat by Evelyn's hospital bed, listening to her soft words of gratitude, he felt a sense of peace. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself spending more and more time with the elderly couple, helping Henry navigate the complexities of hospital bureaucracy and insurance forms. It was during one of these visits that Ethan noticed something odd. As he helped Henry sort through a stack of papers, a bank statement caught his eye. The balance was far higher than he would have expected for a couple struggling to pay their medical bills. Confused, Ethan gently broached the subject with Henry. The old man's face crumpled, and for a moment, Ethan feared he had overstepped. "I suppose it's time we told you the truth, my boy," Henry said, his voice heavy with emotion. He explained that he and Evelyn were not poor at all. In fact, they were quite wealthy, having made their fortune in real estate decades ago. The incident at the diner had been a test, one they had been conducting in various forms for years, trying to find someone with true compassion in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent. As Henry's words sank in, Ethan felt a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, betrayal, and then slowly, understanding. He thought of all the people in their community struggling with real financial hardships, including his own mother. The revelation of Evelyn and Henry's wealth opened up a world of possibilities, but it also presented a moral dilemma that Ethan knew would change everything. Word of Evelyn and Henry's true financial status spread quickly through the small town, eliciting a range of reactions. Some praised the couple for their clever social experiment, while others felt deceived and angry. Ethan found himself at the center of it all, fielding questions and sometimes accusations from neighbors and classmates alike. Through it all, he struggled to reconcile his feelings about the elderly couple he had come to care for deeply. One afternoon, as Evelyn was preparing to be discharged from the hospital, she and Henry asked Ethan to sit down for a serious conversation. "We've been thinking," Evelyn began, her eyes twinkling despite her frail appearance. "We'd like to offer you something, Ethan. A chance to continue your education, to secure your future and your mother's." Henry nodded, adding, "We'd like to set up a trust fund for you, my boy. Enough to cover your college education and then some." Ethan sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of their offer washing over him. His mind raced with the possibilities. No more financial stress for his mother. A chance at a top-tier education, a secure future. But along with the excitement came a nagging sense of unease. He thought of his neighbors, of Mr. Smith struggling to pay for his mother's medication, of the Patels saving every penny for their daughter's education. Can I Can I have some time to think about it? Ethan finally managed to say. Evelyn and Henry exchanged a knowing look. Of course, dear, Evelyn said softly. Take all the time you need. We know it's a big decision. As Ethan left the hospital that day, his head spinning with thoughts and possibilities, he knew he had a lot to consider, and some important conversations ahead. That night, Ethan barely slept, his mind whirling with the enormity of Evelyn and Henry's offer. As dawn broke, he made his way to the small park near his apartment, seeking clarity in the quiet of the early morning. As he sat on a bench, watching the neighborhood come to life, an idea began to take shape in his mind. What if, instead of accepting the money for himself, he could use it to help the entire community? Excited by the possibility, Ethan spent the next few days researching and planning. He learned about community foundations, micro-loan programs, and educational trusts. He thought about all the hard-working people in his neighborhood, each with their own dreams and struggles. With trembling hands, he sketched out a rough proposal for a community fund that could provide assistance to those in need, support local businesses, and offer educational opportunities. Gathering his courage, Ethan presented his idea to Evelyn and Henry. As he spoke, his voice grew stronger, fueled by his passion for the potential impact. Instead of just helping me, he concluded, we could help everyone. We could make a real difference in people's lives. There was a moment of silence when he finished, and Ethan held his breath, waiting for their response. To his relief and joy, Evelyn and Henry's faces broke into wide smiles. "Oh, Ethan," Evelyn said, her eyes glistening with tears. "This is exactly why we chose you. You have a heart for others, a vision beyond yourself." Henry nodded in agreement, adding, "We'd be honored to support this initiative. But remember, starting something like this won't be easy. There will be challenges ahead." As news of the proposed community fund spread, Ethan found himself facing unexpected opposition. Some community members, still bitter about Evelyn and Henry's deception, were skeptical of any initiative associated with them. Others questioned whether a teenager was capable of managing such a significant project. Ethan overheard whispers in the grocery store and saw doubtful looks exchanged at community meetings. One particularly difficult moment came when Mr. Johnson, a respected local business owner, confronted Ethan after a town hall meeting. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice gruff. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you're in over your head. Why don't you just take the money for yourself and leave the community planning to the adults?" Ethan felt his face flush with embarrassment and doubt, but he stood his ground, explaining his vision once more. As the criticism mounted, Ethan found himself questioning his decision. Late one night, overwhelmed by self-doubt, he confided in his mother. Isabella listened patiently, then took his hand in hers. "Ethan," she said softly, "doing the right thing isn't always easy. But I've watched you grow into a young man with a big heart and a clear vision. Don't let fear of failure or other people's doubts stop you from trying to make a difference." Encouraged by his mother's words, and bolstered by support from unexpected allies like Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Rodriguez, Ethan pressed on. He refined his proposal, addressed concerns, and continued to advocate for the community fund. As he navigated the challenges, he found himself growing in confidence and determination, ready to face whatever obstacles lay ahead. The day of the big community meeting arrived, and the local community center was packed. Ethan stood at the front of the room, his heart pounding as he looked out at the sea of familiar faces. He saw his mother beaming with pride, Evelyn and Henry offering encouraging smiles, and even Alice, his ex-girlfriend, watching with curiosity. Taking a deep breath, Ethan began to present his vision for the community fund. As Ethan spoke, outlining the potential benefits and addressing concerns, he could feel the mood in the room shifting. Skepticism gave way to interest, and then to excitement. Mr. Smith stood up, sharing how such a fund could help families like his afford necessary medications. Mrs. Patel spoke about the educational opportunities it could provide for local youth. Even Mr. Johnson, who had been so critical before, grudgingly admitted that the plan had merit. However, not everyone was convinced. Some raised valid concerns about the long-term sustainability of the fund and the potential for mismanagement. A heated debate ensued, with community members passionately arguing both for and against the proposal. Ethan listened carefully to every point, responding thoughtfully and making notes for improvements to the plan. As the meeting drew to a close, Mayor Thompson called for a vote. The room fell silent as hands were raised, first for, then against. Ethan held his breath as the votes were counted. Finally, Mayor Thompson announced the result. By a narrow margin, the community had voted to support the establishment of the fund. The room erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a wave of relief and joy wash over him. It was just the beginning, but it was a start. In the weeks following the community meeting, Ethan found himself busier than ever. With the help of Evelyn and Henry's lawyers and financial advisors, he began the process of legally establishing the community fund. There were countless forms to fill out, regulations to understand, and decisions to be made. Ethan often found himself staying up late into the night, poring over documents and researching best practices for community foundations. One of the first major tasks was forming a diverse board of directors to help oversee the fund. Ethan reached out to respected community members, ensuring a mix of backgrounds and expertise. To his surprise, even some former critics, impressed by his dedication, volunteered to help. Mr. Johnson, the skeptical business owner, offered his financial acumen, while Mrs. Rodriguez brought her deep knowledge of the community's needs. As the framework of the fund took shape, Ethan and the board began to implement some initial projects. They started small, offering microloans to local businesses and setting up a scholarship program for high school students. The impact was immediate and heartening. Mr. Chang was able to expand his corner store, creating 2 new jobs. Sarah Patel, a brilliant student who had worried about affording college, received the fund's first scholarship. However, not everything went smoothly. There were disagreements among board members about fund allocation, and some initiatives didn't have the impact they had hoped for. Ethan found himself navigating complex decisions and learning difficult lessons about leadership and community development. But with each challenge, he grew more confident and committed to the vision of a stronger, more supportive community. As months turned into years, the community fund became an integral part of life in the neighborhood. Under Ethan's guidance, and with the continued support of Evelyn and Henry, the fund expanded its reach and impact. The once struggling diner where it all began was now thriving, having received a grant to renovate and expand. The local park, once neglected, had been transformed into a vibrant community space with the help of fund-sponsored volunteer initiatives. Ethan, now in his final year of high school, had grown into a respected young leader. His experiences with the fund had taught him valuable lessons in perseverance, problem-solving, and the power of community. He watched with pride as neighbors helped neighbors, as local businesses flourished, and as more young people like him found opportunities to pursue their dreams. The ripple effects of the fund's work were visible throughout the community. Crime rates had dropped as more youth found meaningful employment and engagement. The local school saw improved performance as resources for tutoring and enrichment became available. Even the atmosphere of the neighborhood had changed, with a renewed sense of pride and connection among residents. Perhaps most remarkably, Ethan noticed a shift in how people treated each other. The spirit of kindness and generosity that had started with his simple act at the diner had spread, creating a culture of mutual support and compassion. As he walked down the street, Ethan often overheard stories of neighbors helping each other, of small acts of kindness that were changing lives in big ways. On a warm spring evening, Ethan sat on the porch of Evelyn and Henry's house, now a second home to him. As they sipped lemonade and watched the sunset, Ethan reflected on the journey of the past few years. "I never imagined that paying for your meal that day would lead to all this," he mused. Evelyn patted his hand affectionately. "You had it in you all along, dear. We just gave you the opportunity to shine." As they talked, Ethan shared his plans for the future. He had been accepted to several colleges, all impressed by his community work, but he was torn about leaving. "I worry about the fund, about the community," he confessed. Henry chuckled softly. "The true measure of a leader is not in how much they do, but in how well they prepare others to carry on without them," he said wisely. "You've built something beautiful here, Ethan. Now it's time for you to grow in new ways." Ethan nodded, understanding the truth in Henry's words. He had already begun training a group of younger teens to take on leadership roles in the fund. As he thought about the potential for spreading the model of the community fund to other neighborhoods, even other cities, he felt a familiar spark of excitement. There was still so much to learn, so much good to be done. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude. For Evelyn and Henry, for his mother, for every person who had been part of this incredible journey. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but he was ready to face it with the same spirit of kindness and determination that had started it all. The ripple effect of that one act of kindness had created waves of change, and Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. I really hope you enjoyed the story. Please leave a comment with your views. I'm sure there will be new videos on this channel that will thrill you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos. Until next time.